Okay, for the purpose of notes, I'm kind of hitting a couple of videos here, and I know I went kind of fast on that last one, but let me give you all these notes, and I think that'll help you. Basically, I'm going to give you areas that are going to be on your test. Some of them tie in directly to the question. Some of them will be worded a little bit different. But let me give you some more information that you need to know for this test as you're taking notes, and then we'll stop and spend a little bit of time just kind of looking at this. Okay, so. Now, we have something called the mastoid, M-A-S-T-O-I-D sinuses. The mastoid sinuses are not paranasal sinuses. Okay, when it says which sinuses are not paranasal sinuses, it's a mastoid. All right, what are the P-H-A-R-Y-N-G-E-A-L tonsils located? Okay, the pharyngeal. Okay, where are the pharyngeal tonsils located? They're located in the nasal pharynx, okay, in the nasal pharynx. I'm going to come back a little bit and talk about tonsils. We'll talk about what they are and what they do. They're very important in the respiratory system because, well, we'll come back and talk about them in a little bit. Let's let you take notes here on potential test questions. Which passageway serves as a common route for food or air, okay? All right. Now listen to this. This is kind of interesting because you might miss this. Which passageway serves as a common route for food or air? Now, one of the answers is esophagus, but that's not the answer. The answer is L-A-R-Y-N-G-O-P-H-A-R-Y-N-X. Okay, it's the laryngopharynx. Okay, L-A-R-Y-N-G-O-P-H-A-R-Y-N-X. It's not the trachea. It's not the esophagus. It's the laryngopharynx. All right, what is that again? It's a passage that serves as a common route for food and air. Now, here's the thing: is that simultaneously? Okay, that's simultaneously. The esophagus could actually, you could make a point in case, but the esophagus is not actually determined to carry both food and air. It's determined to carry one or the other. It's possible that the esophagus is full of either solids or liquids and doesn't have any air in it, so that's why it's an incorrect answer. What is the opening of the larynx called? Okay, the opening of the larynx is called the glottis. We have the G-L-O-T-T-I-S, the glottis and the epiglottis, and that's what causes, that's this flap that closes down that allows the food to travel in one area, okay, and allows the air to go in another. That's why sometimes if you're drinking milk and you start to talk at the same time, and you're going to actually, you're going to close the glottis or the epiglottis. We'll talk about that in a little bit. That's why sometimes as you drink the milk, you close the glottis there and the epiglottis, so that as it comes down, it can't go in there, and we've got air into the trachea because we're talking. So that's when you might get milk out your nose. So you might have done that in your lifetime, and if you haven't missed out on a lot, but it's quite an experience. Okay. So once again, what's that question there? What is the opening to the larynx called? It's called the glottis. What is the Adam's apple directly part of? Okay, and once again, we're talking about Adam's apple. Okay, it's right here. Some people have a bigger Adam's apple than others. Okay, but the Adam's apple is actually the thyroid cartilage. It's actually the cartilage around the thyroid. The thyroid cartilage is actually the Adam's apple. Which part of the respiratory T? Okay, when we say respiratory T, we're talking about the trachea coming down, breaking off into the bronchial tubes. Okay, which part of the respiratory tree has the greatest relative percent of smooth muscle fibers? And it's the bronchioles. Okay, because the bronchial tubes have these smooth muscle fibers. Which part of the respiratory tree has the greatest relative percentage of smooth muscle fibers? It's the bronchioles. The only structures that allow gas diffusion across them, okay, are the what? And I think you would know this, okay. The only structures that allow diffusion across them, okay, the gas diffusion all occurs in the alveoli. The alveoli is the only one that allow gas diffusion there. Okay, now then, let's a couple more here. Within the bronchial tree, which tubes are small branches that enter the lobes of the lungs? Okay, so so what actually enters into the lobes of the lungs? Now, it's not the bronchial tubes, because this goes a little bit further. And this is intra, okay? Intra meaning into, I-N-T-R-A, and then lobular, I-N-T-R-A, L-O-B-U-L-A-R, that's one word. The interlobular bronchioles, okay? So it's inter meaning in, lobular into the lobes. So when we think that, it says, it's really just, if you speak Latin, that the answer is in the answer. Within the bronchial tree, which tubes are small branches that enter the lobules, it even says of the lungs, it's the intralobular bronchioles. Okay, thin-walled outpouchings of the alveolar ducts of the lungs are the what? Okay, so let's see what they're saying here. Okay, so they're saying thin-walled. Okay, now it says outpouchings. An outpouching means that it forms this pouch from the inside out. It expands. Okay, that's outpouching. All right, so thin walls. All right. Outpouching of the alveolar ducts of the lungs are the what? And the answer is the alveolar sacs. Okay, so all the little alveoli have alveolar sacs. Now, what are those? Thin-walled outpouches of the alveolar ducts of the lungs. Okay, are alveolar sacs. Now, you can see why I'm kind of going over some of these. These are the ones I'm giving you here are kind of the fine line ones, the really detailed ones. I mean, we got a lot of general things. It's interesting that in the state standards we've got a lot of real simple things. I guess they figure that you understand oxygen, carbon dioxide, respiratory system. I think they think you get that, but then they're like, okay, if you get these finer line things, okay, which are really in the standards that you have to be able to show me that you've mastered, then it shows me that you understand the other. Okay. So, once again, hope you're taking some good notes. The primary force responsible for air moving into the lungs during inhalation. Okay, so what's the force? This is an easy one. Don't make this one too hard. What's the force responsible for air moving into the lungs? The answer is atmospheric pressure. So, isn't that interesting? The pressure of the atmosphere is actually pushing. Okay, so if I open my mouth and breathe in, the pressure that's actually the atmospheric pressure on the outside, the barometric pressure of the air, actually is the pressure that causes that to come in. Wow, that's kind of interesting. So you mean to tell me that if I was on the moon and I didn't have atmospheric pressure, of course I wouldn't have oxygen, I mean that's technicality, but that I would have well, it's bigger than a technicality. Okay. So if I was on the moon, I would have a hard time breathing because I wouldn't have any atmospheric pressure. Because what are my lungs trying to do? They're trying to balance out internal pressure and external pressure. What's the external pressure? The external pressure is atmospheric pressure. Okay? And now, once again, if you've been through your chapter, you've already had that. But it's kind of interesting. The lipoprotein known as surfactant. Okay? The answer here is surfactant. We talked about that a while ago. The lipoprotein known as surfactant reduces surface tension within the alveoli so they do not collapse. Now, did you hear that was kind of in two different sentences or two different questions here? A while ago we had the alveolar surfactant that comes off of the wall and goes inside this and keeps it from collapsing. Same type question. This is a lipoprotein known as what reduces surface tension within the alveoli so that they do not collapse during exhalation, breathing out, expiration. And that's surfactant. The force of exhalation, breathing out, is primarily due to what? And the answer is it's the elastic recoil of the thoracic muscles. Okay? It's the elastic recoil of the thoracic muscles. Literally, as we breathe in, we pull this air in, we create a difference between the atmospheric pressure and the internal pressure, and then as we recoil those muscles, that actually causes us to breathe out. So the force of exhalation is primarily due to the elastic recoil of the thoracic muscles. Even after the most forceful exhalation, breathing out, a certain volume of air remains in the lungs. This volume of air is called what? It's called the residual volume. So even after we breathe out, we leave a certain amount of air in our lungs. Now why is that? We got to keep our lungs from collapsing. We have to keep a certain amount of air. The lungs themselves are actually almost like, and I don't want to make it sound there exactly like this, but it's almost like the saran wrap you get out of your kitchen drawer. Have you ever had that? You pull off a piece and all of a sudden two pieces stick together, the lungs are that type of material. If we don't have some air in the middle, called residual air, and those lungs stick to each other, then the lungs stick to each other and those alveoli compact, and we can actually lose part of our lung. Okay. Now I'm going to say really quick, it's important that we breathe really deep, because the deeper we breathe, if we get to shallow breathing, especially older people a lot of times begin to lose a certain amount of lung capacity, because that lining begins to attach and it gets harder and harder to open. So if we don't exercise or breathe deep, then we have to be really careful because we lose some of that residual volume in our lungs. Okay? So the maximum amount of air a person can exhale after taking the deepest breath possible is called their vital capacity. So one of the things we do in somebody in the hospital, we give them, especially somebody who's had surgery, or somebody that's had heart surgery, they had to cut the sternum, they're having trouble breathing because of the pressure. The vital capacity is the maximum amount of air that we can breathe out, okay, after taking the deepest breath possible. So my vital capacity is how much air I breathe out after taking the deepest breath. Now, we're going to come in the next video and we're going to talk about some things. And I don't want you to skip the next video, because the next video is really important. But that's basically the fine line test questions that you're going to have. So we're going to stop there, and I'm going to come back in and talk about a few things that I want to close up in this chapter on respiration.